Hello, everyone. I am Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. Perpetual Chess is a weekly chess interview show with accomplished chess players, authors, personalities, and adult improvers where they discuss their lives, their careers, and share tips about how to improve at chess. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. So without further ado, let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We are here with an oft-requested return guest. He is the two-time British champion and an award-winning author. He's also shown great longevity as a competitor near the top of the chess world. He's currently ranked number 42 in the world at, I believe, the age of 47. His
right.
books... Good. I forgot to fact check. His books, Game Changer and Chess for Life, were both co-authored with Natasha Regan and are both favorites of this podcast. You can hear us discuss them in episode 112. He, of course, also has written many other fantastic books. His new one, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, goes beyond just talking about Alphazero, as Game Changer famously did, and extracts lessons for humans from many of the other super engines. He's also a book reviewer for New in Chess magazine. He's been covering the World Championship for Kasparov-Chess with Kasparov himself. So there is lots to talk about, and we have lots of great listener questions to dig into. But first, let's welcome Grandmaster Matthew Sadler back to Perpetual Chess. Welcome, Matthew.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you on. As we were just saying, there's so much to talk about, Matthew. But what I'd like to begin with is we've got to get some time management tips from you. And by time management, I don't just mean chess clock management, but I mean, how do you do so much stuff? It's just amazing. Like, what's your secret to being so productive?
I guess the point is that I'm really only doing stuff that I really enjoy. You know, I mean, with chess, you know, I'm analyzing continually. I guess, you know, I mean, I'm watching a lot of engine games all the time on the TCEC, and I'm analyzing them continually. And then, you know, at some stage, it just sort of builds up. And then you've got lots of stuff that you can present at once, you know. It's but it's all to do with enjoyment, really, you know. And I don't rely on chess for my, you know, as my job. I have a full-time job, so you know, it's I don't need to do anything you know, particularly commercial either. I can just you know, publish information and or publish videos or write some articles when I feel like it, and it doesn't really matter to me. And I think that's, you know, it's a lovely freedom. I mean, obviously I was professional for quite a while before. You know, I've experienced the other side of it, and but I have to say I much prefer it this way. I mean, I love chess. I can't get away from it. You know, it's you know, my very favorite way of spending my free time. And but you know, in this way, I just get to do what I want, and then you know, if I fancy publishing it, I do it when I like, you know. So it's a dream, really, you know, from my point of view.
Yeah, and your enthusiasm definitely comes across in everything that you do. Now, Matthew, right before we hit record, you did confess to me, though, that for your non-chess work in IT, you work 4 days a week, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So that, for any listeners wondering, that's a small bit of the mystery, because even for your New in Chess review, which is your book reviews, which are indispensable, you're reading like five books per month. It appears that in itself, as someone who reads a lot of chess books, I'm impressed.
Yeah, that is quite a bit of that is quite a bit of work, actually. It's actually, normally I read just a little bit more, and then, you know, I really only try to review books that I particularly like. All books that are thought-provoking. You know, I might not like them so much, but they really, you know, I feel like, oh, well, they really made me think, you know. But yeah, I mean, you know, again, from that point of view, if it was, you know, just sort of dull drudgery, then, you know, I think you'd probably stop quite quickly. But the quality of books that comes out nowadays is so good. You know, I mean, every single book, I'm learning something new and seeing something interesting, you know, whether it's about an opening or you know, a great old player or old events or the middle game or anything. You know, there's just so much fantastic information at the moment that again, it just remains a pleasure to keep on reading books.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Time is the only constraint, really. It's not the number of books to read. So again, I have a sense of this from reading your reviews, but what are some of your recent favorites, Matthew?
Oh, there's quite a few, actually. I mean, I think one that I want to mention is Winning by Nigel Short, and maybe give him a shout out because he's in hospital at the moment with COVID. So yeah, big shout out to Nigel. You know, keep on fighting. Hope you get better soon. I mean, what I liked about the book actually was in particular was the structure. That Nigel just took tournaments where he'd won and sort of gave the good, the bad, and the ugly, really. I mean, that was something where I read it and I sort of thought, I wish I'd read this when I was younger. Because I got very upset, when I was playing good tournaments, if I played a bad game, I thought, what's happening? This doesn't sort of fit into my great tournament. But Nigel's just showing that with even in a great tournament, the great successes of his career, there were moments where he played less well, moments where he played badly, where things went wrong, but still, the overall impression was very, very positive. And I think that's an enormously important practical lesson. And that was one of the things where I thought, if I'd read that when I was young, that would have been really, really useful. I mean, other books that I've loved, the books on Boguljubov by Elkan Ruby. I love those. I mean, Boguljubov's a big, a player I really like a lot, and I wrote quite a few articles about his games on my blog at the time, and they've done a lovely job of presenting all his games and also getting together what the strengths of his play were, because he was sort of a player who grew up in the era of great champions, Capablanca, Lasker, Alekhine, and in comparison to those, of course, your play pales. It's never going to look so impressive, but somehow these books really brought out what his strengths were. Enormous optimism, a great all-round game, good feel for the initiative. For the time, a great, a very not deep opening knowledge, but broad opening knowledge. He could play pretty much anything. And again, I think when I was 10 or 11, I just, looked at Boguljubov's results in the World Championships and thought, loser, don't want to be like that. Having been a chess professional, having, struggled so hard and, to get where I got, which was, sort of top 20, you understand really, how great the skill involved was in there, and you appreciate players like that a lot better. And and that's one of the beautiful things nowadays. People are bringing out books about players like that, and you can really appreciate these kind of lesser known players to their full extent. And he really played some wonderful games as well, Boguljubov. So that was a very nice game. And I think just maybe the final one to mention is a book by Jan Timman, who's just been on the show actually, but The Unstoppable American. And I thought that was a wonderful book because, again, it's all about this realism. It's the same thing that you had with Nigel's book, because you sort of look back on how did Bobby achieve all his wonderful results, and you sort of assume that it was just very smooth. He just won all those games and nobody could resist him. But the number of games in which he was struggling, in which there were long grinds to victory and all that, it's when you see it in context, it really gives you an idea of this was a human being, who just got himself together in an incredible way. In order to play at a very high level, but it wasn't smooth, it wasn't plain sailing. And again, I think those are very valuable lessons, for young players to take away, to get a realistic idea about what you need, what's it costs in order to get to the top. And, I think that when I was young, I didn't really have that very good sense of it. And I maybe thought at times that things were way too difficult or should be too easy somehow, and I think books like this really give a very good impression of what it takes to become the best.
Yeah, it was interesting to read that even the legendary Taimanov 6-0 air quotes wipeout, the games were quite competitive.
They were great. They were really good. Taimanov was a very interesting player. A little bit fragile, flaky, you could say, but maximum strength was very, very high. But again, it was just amazing how Bobby at just at the critical moments of the game, he was able to marshal himself and give absolute 100% concentration. And probably that's something that Taimanov just couldn't quite manage to the same extent, and that's why all those, and just Taimanov was incredibly unlucky, of course, that all the crucial moments turned against him somehow. Every single time Bobby managed to find something and turn it around, not just from a worse position to a draw, but to a win for him. From that point of view, I think when we look at the recent performance of Magnus against Jan, I think we're seeing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that was a point that Jan Timman highlighted it as well. I mean, if you just look at chess styles, Fischer wouldn't necessarily be the first comp to Carlsen, but because of their ability, their competitive drive, their ability to win the tight games stands out for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at this match, I think what I really felt was the big difference was Magnus's experience in World Championship matches. Because I mean, you have a look just at the chances that both players had. Magnus had chances, a tiny one in Game 6, and then bigger ones in Games 8, 9, and 11, and he scored 4 out of 4. And Jan had chances in Games 2 and Game 6 and scored half out of 2. And, you sort of feel that, the difference there was that, Magnus, he's been in lots of world championships. He's got, I think, now a sort of intuitive, emotional sense of when the critical moments in a match are. And at those moments, he knows that he has to marshal himself 100% in order to make the most of it, because opportunities in world championships are few and far between. And I mean, the games that he won, 8, 9, 11 were, relatively simple chances. But still, if you look at the execution, once he got it to a technical end game, the quality of execution there, you couldn't have got much better from Stockfish. I mean, really, I was looking at the evaluations from segue, this Norwegian very strong hardware that analyzes the games, and it's just increasing move by move. The evaluation, which I can tell you is very, very unusual. It's a really high class of technique, which means that his concentration was extremely high there. And then you look at Jan and the chances that he had Game 2, which was actually a very good chance, in Game 6. I mean, Game 2 was very complicated, a very strange position, but it is the type of position that you'd say, okay, if Jan's going to beat Magnus, that would be the one I'd give him, right? I mean, but you sort of felt that that Jan kept on playing at sort of normal World Championship intensity. He didn't. And, really that feeling of, this is it, this is my moment, this is where everything I've got has got to go on the table. Looking back at the moves, they feel sort of a little loose, I guess, and just not quite the same quality as Magnus at those moments. And I think that was really for me, that was the big difference between the two players.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. And of course you were doing a lot of work with your engines in conjunction. You made a few videos sort of going down rabbit holes of various positions working with the super engines. And I know we had briefly mentioned before we started recording, you saw Peter Heine Nielsen's game recap, match recap with I am Sagar Shah of Chessbase India. As I mentioned in last week's interview with Erwin Lemay, definitely a must watch. But it was interesting to me that Peter found time to look through some of the engine games you'd shared, the engine on engine in various positions. So how did it feel to find that out? And were you in like direct contact with Peter, or how did that come about?
No, not in direct contact with Peter, but I know that he follows the TCEC games, the website where they did these games. He follows it quite closely. I mean, he's a big engine fan. I mean, I think when Alphazero came out, that was really a big trigger for Peter. I mean, he really got very into the games, and I think that's the sign of a good trainer, right? I mean, something new comes along, and you think, right, okay, how can we use that, to get an advantage? And well, certainly, I think if you look at how Magnus played in 2019 and the types of games he played as well, I think he got some inspiration from the whole Alphazero thing, which of course, that's the huge thing about Magnus. I think you can probably just show him an idea in just in 5 seconds, and then you can just apply it, just like that. But so I mean, I'm not surprised that he was following the games. But he seemed really, really up to date with absolutely everything, which was very, very impressive indeed. But it was a very interesting thing to do. I mean, we'd we talked, the TCEC site, it's a site of volunteers, right? And they're just doing this all in their spare time and running these enormous tournaments. And we sort of discussed about, would it be interesting to kibitz during the match? But somehow it felt like everyone else would be doing that. But this whole idea of taking critical positions from the match afterwards and then replaying them with these superhuman strength engines, just to get a real sense of what might have happened and what was the actual objective result was fantastic. I mean, it's something that I've talked a lot about in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, this way of training, and it's the way basically that I've been analyzing more or less since started doing all the work on Alphazero. And it's just such a powerful way of doing it, because if you just let an engine analyze just on one move, however deep you want to do it, still there's all this doubt about okay, I can see this line 50 ply deep, but is it really going to happen? When the engines actually have to make decisions on moves, you see a whole game unfolding. You see the flow of the game. Quite apart from the moves themselves, you understand. Oh, does that look difficult for black to play, or is that easy? All those sort of things. Those sort of very human emotions come out of it. And if you run a match of 10 games, from similar positions, you get one game of each color, 20 games, and you just see that flow afterwards. You get a brilliant sense of when did the game turn, when was it too late, when did white still have chances, for example. And it's all about it's really all about how can you use engines to give you those human feelings and emotions about games, and how can you have engine analysis that lives in your head, rather than just being sort of a wodge of text in Chessbase that you're trying to decipher, and trying to understand whether it works or not. And what I found, probably that's part of getting a bit older as well, but I enjoy long variations less. But what I enjoy very much are, evocative games, evocative variations that aren't necessarily, the complete truth about a position, but that really capture the essence of what the position's about. Is it an attacking position? Is it a position where I should play positionally? And playing lots and lots of engine games like that is a lovely way to do it. And the TCEC was fantastic. I mean, thanks to those games, you zoom in on something like Game 6 and you see, well, Nepo could have taken twice on b4 on move 35 and move 36. And, with the engine games that were played, you could see very clearly that, well, move 35, taking on b4 was actually more or less drawn in a couple of ways. Then taking on move b4 on move 36, that was really dangerous, but possibly still a draw. Some ways to hold. Leela got very close to holding it against Stockfish, and Stockfish managed to hold it against Leela for Magnus. So. Really amazing insights, that you get from that. And as I said, in the book and also in the supplementary material, trying to explain how you do that and also give the step-by-step instructions how to do it. And I can really, I really recommend it to absolutely everyone to work with engines in this way.
That's really interesting that even those moments that people highlighted in Game 6 where Nepo near the first time control could have, again, air quotes, taken control, may have been drawn. And Peter Heine Nielsen, correct me if I'm wrong, but he also highlighted in the interview with Sadler that in Game 5, everyone was highlighting when Nepo didn't go c4 and c5 to sort of put the clamps down and achieve this bind. But I believe Peter also said that the engines were holding that for black.
Yeah, I mean, but that then becomes very interesting, because then the sort of the human judgment comes in. I mean, after this move c4 in game or move 20 in Game 5, the engines were holding it by playing this move, Queen e6, which is a very odd move. It puts the queen opposite the light squared bishop, but pins this pawn on c4 so it can't advance. But human. If I played a move like that in a game, it would be, it would probably be the thing that I said. Okay, well, I think I've got to do this, but I'm a little bit, nervous, and I think those are the things, of course, that you've also got to keep in mind. When you look at all this fantastic engine analysis, is you've always got to keep the human perspective in mind of how difficult is this? Is this a move? Does this have, does this move that the engine wants, does it have any characteristics that would make it, difficult for me as a human to find? And you've never got to lose sight of that, because it's a very, in a way, the World Championship is very funny, right? Because, you've got two human players with all their, wonderful players, but with their frailties and their limited memories and calculating abilities, analyzing for months and months beforehand with, superhuman strength engines, and then afterwards having to, take the battle, not against a superhuman strength engine, not against objectivity or the objective truth of chess, but against another human being with all his frailties, and this makes it, there's, I think, probably the role of seconds in World Championship preparation has changed, enormously, because I think, beforehand, just from my experiences analyzing being a second for Joël Lothier in the pre-computer age, before you had a void and you had to fill that with ideas. And now you've just got a mass of data, and you've just got to pick out promising ideas that a human opponent might have overlooked, ideas that, contain poison that would be difficult for a human. It's a big translation, that has to take place, and requires a lot of inventiveness, a lot of practical cunning, and, but a very different sort of creativity, I think, nowadays.
Yeah, it was interesting to me that Peter Heine Nielsen again said that the days where seconds need to stay up all night are over, because the engines are so strong that it's more a matter of cultivating.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, you really see a big shift, I'd say pre-Alphazero to post-Alphazero. That's probably not something that the engine guys particularly like, if you describe it like that. But just from from the practical chess player point of view, that's how it sort of feels. But around 2017, of course you were totally smashed by any of the engines. They'd just been way stronger for so long, but you still had the idea that you had a lot to offer in terms of opening understanding and also positional understanding. Simply certainly in the opening, Stockfish at the time somehow didn't quite have that the urgency that humans have in the opening. The desire to make the most of the initial momentum that you have when you're developing your pieces, and from that point of view, Stockfish's general opening play was not that strong, whereas of course the rest of its game was already at 3,500 elo strength, and also for positional ideas, you often had the feeling, well, I understand this position better, and what's being suggested here is not right. You move to Alphazero, and Alphazero sort of brought really two things. I think first of all, the realization that a lot of the whole sacrificial area of the game, pawns for long-term compensation, exchange sacrifices for long-term compensation, that was a part of the game that we'd sort of thought, oh, that's probably not very good, because every time we try it, we just lose to Stockfish. But Alphazero showed that was possible. And now, to be honest, if you look at engine games nowadays, they're just replete with sacrifices, just all over the place. I mean, it's quite amazing. But the other thing that happened was that you suddenly realized that actually the engines, Alphazero was the first, of course, but it's all the engines nowadays. They're actually stronger than you in the opening and in the in positional play. They actually understand stuff a lot better than you, and that's something really, really interesting to think about. Why is that, and how could I emulate that? It's there really, there has been just a huge shift from 2018 onwards, where essentially engines, I think, just became much stronger at all parts of the game, not just tactics and defense and and combinations.
Yeah, well, I think the question of how can I emulate them, let's be real, that's the question a lot of listeners want to know, because we're never going to calculate perfectly. We're always going to make mistakes. And certainly from having read and enjoyed the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, I have my own conclusions that I could share. But first, I'd like to hear yours. So especially for club players, because obviously you've been an elite player for decades, so you're coming at it from a different perspective. But let's say below 2000, something like that, can we still learn from like 3600 against 3600 engine games?
Yeah, I mean, the point is, I am absolutely convinced that we should try and, it shouldn't be a question of trying to make machines play human-like. We should be trying to play a bit more machine-like, but really on one specific area. And actually, Demis Hassabis said this to Natasha and I when we were writing Game Changer, but it didn't quite hit me until I heard a Lila Zero developer say something very similar. But the major strength of the engines, an engine like Lila Zero, is in the evaluation. It's, and calculation adds, maybe a quarter of its extra strength, but it's all about evaluation. You just take Leela. I mean, it's what I did in the Silicon Road. I did this match against Leela where it calculates not a single move. It's just purely going on its evaluation. And, I made, sort of 78% or something against it. But, for something that's not calculating a single move in such a tactical game as chess, that's incredible. Apparently I was talking to the Leela, to a very nice Leela guy who explains a lot to me. And, he was saying that, they got stronger and stronger. Probably could expect that Leela, just evaluating, not calculating a single move, is something like 2500, 2550 strength. And, and what they're working on continually is to make it, even stronger, that it's, elite GM strength without calculating a single move, just on evaluating the position. And, it really made me think about, because, in all my career, I have spent so many hours working at chess, but I have never consciously thought I need to work on my evaluation. I've practiced my tactics. I've, practiced learning end games. I've worked hard on openings. I've looked at typical middle games, but I've never really thought about, how do I improve my evaluation of positions? And, when you, again, that struck me so much when I was then analyzing just normal quiet positions with Alphazero and seeing that a lot of my evaluations were just off. I was saying, oh, this must be good for white, but it wasn't, or this must be good for black, and it wasn't. And and then you do it again with Leela, with Stockfish, and you see that a lot of your evaluations are off from that point of view. And I've been thinking a lot about, why could this be, and I frankly think that it's to do with all the terrible material that I grew up with, because you look at all these the books that you grew up with, and many of them actually contain very bad analysis. I mean, you run them past the engine, and half of the games have got huge tactical mistakes, and even classic games in which they demonstrate, the power of a weak complex of dark squares. You put it on the engine, and the engine says, yeah, but the opponent was winning until the end. It was just it was just something wrong, and somehow that hasn't affected you badly. This bad material. I mean, somehow that incredible human ability to just abstract. Just the essence of something and not remember the details, as that's added to your knowledge, and that's made you strong. But I think, what you learn from the engines is that, you've got the outer theme that you can see, like, for example, an isolated queen's pawn, or weak dark squares, or whatever. But there's also, a huge amount of stuff going inside that's not immediately visible, like, I think, the inner harmony of the pieces, and the way that the pieces work together. And I mean, if you've ever, you can experiment with this yourselves. I've done it, and I saw who was it who did it as well? Sam Shankland in his book on pawns. I'm not sure what the name is anymore, but great book on just focusing on pawns, and he was just moving pawns, one square back, one square forward, or you move a piece one square left, one square right, and it makes a massive difference to the position. You could say that this game is all about a weak complex of dark squares, but move a knight in the position from G7 to F7, and suddenly, the theme's completely different. The dark squares don't seem to be weak anymore. So there's this wonderful interaction, I think, of the theme that you can see on the board, and also the inner workings, the inner harmony of the piece, between the position and between the your pieces and the opponent's pieces, and I think that's what engines pick up really, really well. You know, they have this incredible, great sense of mobility and the way that pieces have to be placed. And I think that you know, probably that's sort of something that you wouldn't pick up from bad examples, you know, that you looked at when you were young, because that was pretty random, really, whether you know whether that inner harmony of the pieces was good or not. It was all about demonstrating an outer theme. And I do think that young players nowadays, growing up with enormously high quality material on which, you know, if there's an example in a book, it's not only correct, you know, from the thematic point of view, but also from the, you know, from the tactical point of view as well. You know, I think they are going to be having, you know, much better evaluations than players of my generation, or much more, I think, much more sophisticated evaluations. You know, and to be honest, you know, when I see games by Alireza, you know, recently, you know, I really have the feeling that this guy, you know, has, you know, again, evaluation on a much higher level. You know, and it's not just about calculation or anything. It's just understanding where the pieces go, understanding how they burn through the board, you know, and show the most activity. And you know, and I mean, so that's something that, you know, I've been you know, thinking about that and thinking, oh, you know, how could you reprogram yourself? But I mean, you know, going back to what can people learn from it? You know, we don't need to look at calculation. What we need to look at is the core of the engines, really, the most impressive part, and that's how they evaluate positions. And I think there's an awful lot to learn, you know, from that.
Man, so many follow-ups, whether it be about Alireza, of course, who's fascinating. Let's start with that one. And by the way, I should say the Shanklin book is called Small Steps to Giant Improvement.
That's the one.
And of
yes,
course,
that's the one.
Yeah. And of course, there's a sequel as well. But with Alireza, so you mentioned what you observed from going through his games. Do you see like an engine footprint? Do you think that these insights that he's able to derive that are sort of superior to a lot of his contemporaries are based on engine work from what you've seen, Matthew?
I think, yeah, I would definitely think, you know, I mean, I think nowadays a player growing up is always influenced. I mean, whether it's working a lot with an engine or just using material that's been rigorously engine checked, you know, and is perfect in every way. But, you know, I just saw some games, you know, there was one against Erdos, I think it was recently in the European Team Championship, where he played this, you know, this artificial castling maneuver, King D7, C7, B8 in some sort of Caro-Kann, and you know, yeah. I mean, I've also seen this quite a lot in engine games. These sort of artificial castling maneuvers, and it just makes everything perfect. You know, it just makes sense of the position, and you know. And then there was and then he followed up also by playing B5 and A5, you know, in front of his king. It's kind of that mixture of you know, very concrete play, but also just this real understanding of where his pieces are going to be at their most active, you know. And I really think that's something you get very strongly from analyzing engine games nowadays. You know, I mean, they really are amazing at making the very most of you know, of really getting optimal squares for the pieces, you know, in all sorts of positions. So, yeah, I mean, I think that you know, that Alireza is a very good example of somebody who's been, I think, very positively influenced by engines, you know, either directly working with them or by the incredible material that's now available because of them.
Yeah, you have some great examples of castling by hand, and the general treatment of the king in your book. So I can definitely see that. But I think that's going to be challenging for club players, because I think part of what they struggle with generally is like when to break the rules. And now this sense of harmony that you described, there's sort of an ineffability, I think, for anyone who's not a grandmaster, let alone a super engine. But one lesson that, to me, I think that we can derive from watching the World Championship and from the engines is just, as you mentioned earlier, the sort of utter lack of regard for material. Like, you know, and any club player who's worried about sacrificing, like, you know, your move might be unsound, but you shouldn't worry too much that it's just going to be like effortlessly beaten back if you can put your opponent to the test. Yeah.
I mean, actually, there was a recent DeepMind paper. It was called Acquiring Knowledge, or how Alphazero acquires knowledge. I mean, that was we gave a talk recently at the London Chess Classic, and Natasha did 3 or 4 great slides on this new paper. And it just they essentially what they try to do, they try to understand, how does Alphazero gain knowledge? I mean, what is important? And one of the beautiful things that came out of it, and that Natasha highlighted, was that when Alphazero starts off, it's virtually random, but it's only really when it gets a sense of what is material, how much are my pieces worth, that suddenly all the rest of its game fits into place. And then once all that's happened, once it's got that idea, this sort of value for its pieces, then actually the value of material drops. And it starts being able to sacrifice again. But, so I think, what you talk about, if you're talking about what do players need to learn, how do they progress from beginner to strong player? There are, as always, there are these phases where I think, first of all, you need to get a good grip of how much my piece is worth. Why is it not good to swap off a rook for somebody's pawn, or something like that? And I actually, to be honest, I've been playing against my nephew, who's 7, and strangely keen on chess.
That's great.
But he's, again, for him, you see that he's really struggling with that concept that, he gets a pawn for a rook, and he says, I've got a pawn,
right.
I've got a guy, you've got a guy, but I've got a guy. And and you see that, that was what you sort of gathered from these Alphazero graphs. But once you it understood about material, you could see again a differentiation in all the themes it was suddenly able to discover. And then afterwards, the value of material dropped as it started to learn more and more that, hey, wait a minute, this is not as rigid a scale. I can start giving up the exchange, start giving up pawns for mobility and other themes that are important. But it's I mean, that was really fascinating as well. But I think certainly where we are nowadays with what we can learn from engines, the value of sacrificing pawns, especially exchanges, for long-term compensation. I mean, that's an enormous part of the game.
Yeah, and on the topic of the evolution of Alphazero, Mark Javes, supporter of the podcast, actually wrote in, and he was curious specifically about the evolution of opening. So he was wondering, excuse me, did Alphazero start, did it trace the evolution of chess, where you start out with more of the romantic type openings, like the Evans and King's Gambit he mentioned, and then get more sound? Did it follow that path?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. As far as I can gather, no, not really. I mean, what really happened was that Alphazero started off playing very randomly, and then seemed to get. It looks like it got a grasp of certain concepts and ways of thinking, and then afterwards it went pretty much to the main lines. So you start seeing very quickly, once it's got past a short initial burst of training, it starts going on to the Rilo pairs, and then moves on from there. But mainline E4. E4 D4 openings, it didn't really follow the it doesn't have a romantic phase, and stuff like that, as far as I can tell. It just basically had a period of not playing very well, playing quite randomly, and then all of a sudden everything clicking into place, and then it just starts playing stronger and stronger, but in the classical way that it played towards the end, really.
No romance from those computers.
No romance, no.
I guess it's not too surprising. Well, Matthew, we have a ton of good listener questions that I want to get into, but first let's take a break and hear from our sponsors. What is new from Chessable, you ask? Well, friend of the pod FM, Kamil Plichta, just dropped Lifetime Repertoires Accelerated Dragon. I know a lot of Accelerated Dragon enthusiasts have been waiting for that, and I've heard rave reviews. I am Christoph Selecki, aka Chess Explained, has a Keep It Simple Black repertoire coming soon. And of course, whether it be an opening course, a tactics course, or an endgame course on Chessable, you can utilize their proprietary space repetition technology to make sure you learn the lessons that are being imparted. So be sure to go to chessable.com and have a look at what's new. And we are back. So Matthew, as I said, we've got a long list of good questions for you. But one thing I wanted to hit before we get to them is one point that I found really interesting in Silicon Road to Chess Improvement. One of those nod your head as you read moments was where you mentioned a conversation you had with Grandmaster Jonathan Tisdale about the more pronounced evaluation values, where it used to be it might be +1 in a position, but now it's +5, even though material might be even in a given position. That's been happening more and more with engines. And so what's your explanation for that?
Yeah, they're just getting better and better. That's the that's the problem. I mean, it was very noticeable actually in game 11, and I was watching Anish Giri's commentary, excellent actually, together with Judith Poldalar, and Magnus reached this rook ending, and the engine was saying +6, and Anish was saying, well, yeah. I'm sorry, it doesn't feel +6 to me. I mean, it's a rook and a pawn, right? And the guy's still got a rook on the board. So I mean that is one of the I guess the difficulties. I mean, this is particularly what you've got to be a little bit careful about is that different engines have different scales of evaluation. So, Stockfish is quite extreme from that point of view. Leela is much more restrained. I mean, I think something like 0.7 for Leela would be +3, +4 for Stockfish. So, I mean, that's slightly different, but certainly, engines, the evaluations have become more and more extreme. But yeah, I mean, you look at the result of the games that they evaluate like that, and it's always correct. It's not like they're getting over optimistic and then scaling back. It's simply that they're seeing much earlier, when a position is just completely winning. And I mean, that makes it tricky for humans to calibrate themselves a little bit, because it really depends on the position, but obviously, a +5 from an engine could be something quite horrifically scary, and that a human would find very, very difficult to replicate, and even +5 for a rook ending, when you're just one pawn up, just feels incredible. But I mean, in general, those evaluations have to be trusted. But again, just in terms of applying it to human play, I mean, I think probably what we're being asked at the moment is the same thing that that I mentioned for the World Championship seconds. You do have to make some sort of translation for yourself all the time back into human play. And some engines make it easier. I think Leela's evaluations are much closer to what I think to human evaluations, as we see them, and they're scaled differently, and also Leela's evaluation, it always takes into account the possibility that the opponent might make some errors and some blunders. So that's why it tends to scale stuff down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think you're always going to have to do some sort of translating back into human terms about what an engine is saying. But I think the evaluations in themselves are objectively absolutely correct. +5 means it's going to be a win. Against best play, and no arguments.
Yeah, I guess in a sense, the results are binary. Either it's a winner or it's a draw. So if it knows it's a win, it's going to start to skew higher. And if it knows it's a draw, it's going to skew lower.
I mean, what was very interesting, and that's, again, coming back to the value of playing engine matches, was that, this ending in game 6, on move 36, between Magnus and Jan, if Jan had played bishop takes b4, the engines were only at +1.5, +2 or something. And it was sort of one of the Stockfish developers.
Minus, right?
Yeah, minus. Sorry, that's right. Yeah, and one of the Stockfish developers said, "Well, that's quite incredible, really. That even at this late stage in the game, lots of pieces exchanged. For the engines, it's not like a clear win. I mean, it's clearly much better for black, but they're not yet sure whether that's going to convert to a clear win or not. And again, that's the value of playing out engine games. You put the engine on at move 36, it'll tell you -2, but is that going to be a win or not? You're not sure. You let them play the game, searching ever deeper as they get further and further into the position, and you get a much better idea of whether it was actually a win or not. So it's. I mean, I thought that was, again, a very interesting demonstration of the power of engine games, from that point of view.
Yeah, and we'll have more on that on some of these listener questions. So let's dig into them. The first one is from Evan Rosenberg, who asks, he says, When Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, the chess world collectively shook for fear that machines had permanently surpassed the capabilities of the human mind. And I distinctly remember Kasparov's suspicions after game 2 when he appeared convinced that there was some human interference because no machine could possibly demonstrate such finesse. Fast forward to today, and any chess enthusiast can download the Stockfish app at no cost with instant access to a super powerful engine to use casually or as seriously as one desires. Can you specify at what point did chess machines become less imposing and threatening and more helpful and awe-inspiring? And do you see a return to the idea that humans are at risk of, for a lack of a better term, chess extinction?
Yeah, I mean, just taking the last question first. I mean, chess extinction, I think if it was going to happen, it would already have happened. I retired from professional chess in 1999, and there were many reasons for it. But one of the reasons that I had was that I really thought that 4 or 5 years, engines there are going to just be so much stronger than humans that nobody's going to be interested in watching humans play. I mean, people are just going to have the engines there and just be able to laugh at grandmasters, whilst they play. But actually, it's turned out, completely differently. And, the beautiful thing about it is that obviously people do get a lot of pleasure from watching chess, from watching the best human players play. But one of the big impediments was that they didn't have a clue what was going on. And, engines have filled in that gap. And, you still need the human commentary, like, Anish and Judith and Fabiano and all these great players. You still need that to give, the real insight. But in terms of knowing basically the evaluation of the position and what's going on and a few little lines, engines have really helped with that. So I don't think we're ever going to go to chess extinction. I mean, I think this way of playing and top level chess is going to carry on for a very, very long time. I mean, when did engines get less scary? I guess simply when they landed on your desktop and you were able to do really cool things with them, and then suddenly people thought, very human, of course, but oh God, I can get an advantage over someone else if I only know how to use this tool properly. And but it was quite funny. I mean, when Natasha and I did Chess for Life, we interviewed Pia Kramling, absolutely lovely lady and very, very strong player. But she said that in the pre-computer age, she worked a lot with her husband, Juan Bellon, who was a incredibly creative player, very strong in openings, and she felt that she had a big advantage. Because they were working together and finding these incredible ideas. And then the computer came along and it destroyed, all of that advantage. And neither of them were computer literate. So it was a huge panic for them. And then, eventually they managed to, to get to grips with it and adjust to the modern age. But yeah, Judith says something very similar, that she didn't particularly want to work with engines, but she realized that you had to do it because it gave, such a massive advantage and such a massive disadvantage if you didn't. So I think as soon as they became available on your local PC and useful, that players changed their attitude to them really, and I think for modern players it would be unthinkable not to have an engine. I remember I talked to Robin van Kampen, a young Dutch GM at a 4NCL one time, and talking about the old days and the old guys. It was then that, to my shock, that I realized that he considered me as an old guy, and one of the dinosaurs. But anyway, that's something else. But trying to explain to him that, Robin, I could spend 2 weeks analyzing, Bishop G5, Najdorf, poison pawn, and after 2 weeks, I wouldn't really be sure, what the evaluation was. I just got a bit further, and then somewhere later, maybe in the next month, I'd try and spend another 2 weeks, to get further. And he's looking at me like, are you? What's the fun in that? What? And it's really a way of working that modern players probably can't even imagine at all nowadays. So I think for them, you take away their engine, that would be like an ultimate crime somehow. Whereas players of my generation, we still remember the good old days. It's with the good and the bad. It's
one of during one of the broadcasts on Ishgiri, speaking of fear of the engines, he was talking about Magnus, and he said that basically that Magnus fears no human and he fears no human move, but what he does fear is engine prep. So And I think that might get to the recent talk about potentially retiring. I do think that even though he came up with these creative ideas, he's, his team, I should say, he and his team, and, showed this lack of materialism that the engine's events, as we've discussed. But I do think that the sort of arms race of like dodging these landmines by the engine might contribute to his lack of enthusiasm for the World Championship in particular. As a quick digression, Matthew, what did you think about this news from Magnus that he may or may not defend his title?
I mean, I've never had such a huge run of continued success, so it's a bit hard to sort of think yourself into that thing, and then it's equally hard to think, why would it be nice to give that up? That's I find that very hard. But I mean, at times, Magnus has seemed a little bored about things, not really about chess, but more about the way of the professional chess player nowadays, with especially that, the ethos of heavy preparation and all that thing. So, in some ways, it's not a complete surprise, to hear him saying this. The nice thing is that, press statements are not given under oath. So, we can allow him to come back from that if he ever wants to. But yeah, I mean, my feeling about it is that he's definitely, he's definitely thinking about it. But yeah, whether it's something that he goes through, or whether it's something that, in a year and a half time, that, he has a different feeling about it, who knows? But I mean, the one thing that I do wonder is, whether if he gave up the World Championship, whether he'd still be able to, to carry on playing, because this is kind of different, but somehow it sort of gets to what I mean is that, when I stopped playing as a professional, I carried on playing Bundesliga for about a year and a half, and my initial naive thought was that take away the need to play professionally, and I'm just going to be able to enjoy myself. I'm going to be able to play creatively, try crazy stuff and all that. It could actually, taking something away could actually add something to my game. But your game, the way that you've built up your game all through your career, it's really an edifice, and every single thing that you've done is a component of it and contributes to its strength, and also some of its weaknesses as well. But take something away from that, and suddenly, you're not quite the same player. And I had that experience, first of all, when I decided that I was going to retire from professional chess. When at my play, that was late 98, I decided to do that. And well, just look at my games from late 98 to 99, when I finally retired. And you see, an awful lot more blunders, an awful decrease in quality and intensity. And then again, when I decided I'm not professional, going to play for some fun, again, you saw a decrease in quality as well. So I don't know, just from my point of view, I don't know whether you could take away like a cornerstone of his personality, which is being world champion, and then hope to still play at the same fantastic level. I certainly know that if anyone's got a chance to do it, then he could do it much better than I ever could. But I do wonder, I mean, because I really feel that being world champion is kind of part of Magnus's competitive ability. I mean, I'd find it really weird to see Magnus Carlsen playing and him not being world champion. I mean, that would be something quite weird. So I don't know, but I can, I think he was completely honest when he said about it, and I think that these probably are the thoughts that only somebody who's been at the top for that long, could really have. I think the rest of us who just looked from the foothills, we probably just have to accept it and understand it, and just hope that that's not the case, that he'll change his mind.
Yeah, and I should have specified for anyone who didn't hear what Magnus had said. He said he is feeling less motivated for every world championship, and he thinks that if Alireza Firouzja were to emerge from the candidates, he would be up for a world championship match against him, but suggested that if anyone else wins, he could potentially vacate the throne. But he said not retire from chess, and he actually, speaking to the issue of motivation, mentioned the possibility of chasing the 2900 ELO reading, which would be crazy. But yeah, I agree with what you said, Matthew. I saw a lot of parsing of motivations online, and I do think he was speaking from the heart. So all we can do is hope that he changes his mind or that Alireza wins the candidates. One or the other. Okay, well, we're going to take one more break, Matthew, and then we've got a bunch of listener questions to get back to. Good news, listeners. According to aimchess.com, I'm now only behind on the clock 75% of the time in my blitz games. That's actually huge progress for me. I'm going to keep working to bring it up, and I recommend you use aimchess.com to address whatever weaknesses you may have in your game, whether it be playing with the white or black pieces, a particular opening, or a particular phase of the game. They give tailored lessons for whatever their algorithm detects, and of course, their algorithm scrapes the games from the major chess playing sites themselves in order to tell you what you need. If you decide to subscribe to aimchess.com after checking it out, be sure to use the promo code Perpetual30. Details are in the show notes. Check out aimchess.com. And we are back, and we're going to dive right into some more listener engine related questions. This one is from Igor Feinstein, and Igor writes to say, if chess is fundamentally a draw and today's engines are rated well over 3,000, what explains chess engines still regularly beating each other? Does that suggest that engines still have flaws, or that they trip up in some quirky situations or endgame situations or other phases of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key point about it is that the starting position of chess is basically a draw. I mean but lots and lots of chess positions aren't draws, and lots of positions are unfathomable, still not calculable by engines. Complex, can go many different ways. Different engines with different approaches will find different moves in them. So, I mean, that's where the richness comes. And that's why, at the TCEC, we do, we have this super final every season, the big final event where two engines fight out a 100-game match, 50 different openings. But, I did the openings together with another nice guy called Jeroen Nomen. I did half of the openings for that match. And there the struggle is to find, complicated openings that will challenge the engines and that will ask them to negotiate unusual problems. So it's I mean, they are not perfect, absolutely not. They have their flaws as well, which you can find out in unusual situations. And so much of chess is not a draw, but just the starting position is really too balanced. And you let the engines play out from the starting position nowadays, you'll get 100 draws. It's even Fischer Random is kind of in danger of that as well. So the TCC again, they're running a Fischer Random competition now, which is always great fun. But I think for the final, they're going to have a small book to try and get some slightly more unbalanced Fischer Random positions. So but I mean. Just in general, still lots and lots of middle game positions that have plenty of scope for play, and still for a long while yet. I think we're still a very long way away from solving chess with engines.
That's good to hear. And on a separate, but I guess related note, we have a question from Chris Lott, Patreon supporter of the podcast. And Chris asks, he says, given the advances in the last few years with Alphazero and Leela and various combos with traditional engines, will the standard advice not to play computers to improve one's game against other humans change? Or maybe another way to phrase the question, will mainstream software ever really play like a human?
Yeah, there's interesting questions. I mean, first of all, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I believe that you should play against engines in order to improve your game. I mean, that's the kind of the more or less the way I've been working, probably for about 6 or 7 years actually, and certainly since Alphazero and Game Changer. So definitely believe there are so many useful ways to use your engines to improve your game. And then in terms of engines becoming human-like. I mean, it's sort of two ways, really. I mean, I think we should maybe become a bit more engine-like as well, and try and get the there's big parts of engine play that I think are really accessible to humans that we should try and emulate. In particular, the quality of your evaluation. But I mean, there are also a lot of tries to make engines that play more like humans. I think Maya on you can play against the Maya bot on Light.
Shout out to Maya.
Yeah, shout out to Maya there. It's and also, I mean, I was talking with one of the with another Leela developer who's again, they're all really young, really friendly guys, who just always happy to spend a lot of time explaining stuff to you. But he was suggesting some parameters. Could you try these and see, how does that affect its play? Does it play more human-like, more towards the level that you'd that could be just a direct training partner? So I'm going to try and give those sort of things a go. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all software, so infinitely tunable and very, very powerful. So it wouldn't amaze me, to be honest, if we could come up with an engine that plays much more like a strong human player. I mean, what's nice about Leela in particular is that even just restricting its search depth, it has this lovely positional style. So it plays very much like a very good positional player. And then just restricting its search depth, you just sort of if you just allow it to search no moves whatsoever, it'll make a few one-move blunders in the middle of some lovely positional play. You let it search just a little bit more, it'll make fewer blunders. Won't find the really complicated tactical line. So even that is a beautiful. I find it a very nice way to play against a weaker engine that's not just making stupid catastrophic blunders just on every 10 moves just to keep the rating lower, but sort of it's kind of a very organic way of playing, but just with with slightly less fantastic calculation abilities. I mean, I find that a very pleasurable way to play. And, in the Silicon Road, I give a number of examples from that match, and it was fantastic fun. I mean, it was really, I had a great time playing against Leela like that. So, I mean, I definitely think it's going to, people, are working on this and it's going to happen. But I think, probably we should be, trying to become a bit more machine-like in our evaluations. But I mean, one thing that sort of, it was kind of something that got me thinking about that too, was that, that Magnus played about 450 games on light chess before the World Championship match, bullet and blitz games.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, okay, let's try and mine that for clues. So I just took the database of his games. Thank you, Light Chess. I mean, incredible resource. And just blunder checked it with my engine. So just looking for, bad blunders. And I have to say that, you look at Magnus, the quality of Magnus's play, the number of terrible blunders that he makes at that speed, and it's so small, absolutely unbelievable. And, I mean, the most blunders that were found were in the conversion phase, where the engine said, oh, well, you could have had plus 15 and now you're only plus 13, but in terms of actual play, the blunders were small, which I think, shows that Magnus's intuition really is at that machine level. I mean, it's really, on virtually no thinking whatsoever. I mean, he's maybe playing 2550, 2600, maybe higher. And I think that is what humans should try to emulate. And if I look at my own strength at that speed, I'm maybe, 2100 or something like that, and I think that, again, if I had my time again, if I'd realized this earlier, I would have been, putting a huge amount of my chess work, not on improving all the other areas of my game, but really working on improving the evaluation, because I think that's the basis of so much of your chess strength. It's and it, also made me, I thought of that as well, because if you're looking at thinking about what happened in the match between Magnus and Jan as well, that Jan, after the game 6, he really, he sort of fell away, but he was saying that he made blunders in games 8, 9, and 11 that he just hadn't he couldn't explain, right? I mean, he didn't understand why he'd made those blunders, and I really think it was a case of probably that game 6 affected Jan even more than he'd realized, and I've had this experience as a professional, that you have a bad loss, and then, somehow you think, oh my goodness, the next day I actually managed to sleep okay-ish. I don't feel too bad. I do my morning routine, tactics, puzzles, studies. I'm okay. I'm fine. I've got my preparation. Okay, let's go to the game. And then the most appalling thing that happens to you is that you turn up to the game and you feel absolutely nothing. It's as if your heart has been broken, and that the whole world around you looks grey and there's no differentiation between any of the moves. You can't tell whether moves are good or bad. And when you analyze chess, it's not linear. I mean, you're looking at stuff, and there's little sparks and ideas flying. Oh, don't play knight b5, bishop b3 loses a piece. All those sort of things, and in that state, you don't feel any of that at all. And then you realize, how much of your blunder checking and how much of your tactical awareness is purely intuitive. It's purely to do with those emotions and those feelings and those sparks of life that you have, when you're functioning normally. And when you lose a bad game like that, it takes that away. And then that's the moment that you can blunder. And that's really what happened to me in a couple of tournaments in '99, when I was thinking of retiring from chess. Really that feeling, that terrible feeling of feeling nothing, of knowing how important it is with your head, but your heart just doesn't react somehow, and I felt somehow that maybe that was what happened with Jan, that he did his, he felt, okay, I think I've recovered from that shock, but somehow it had affected him even more than he thought. And again, that's getting back to that evaluation being such a big part of your chess strength, that intuitive, instinctive stuff that you don't even think about, but that protects you against tactics and protects you against stupid mistakes, and a loss can really affect that.
Yeah, Vasilin Topalov did an interview with Chess24, a brief interview, and he highlighted similar points about Magnus. His stamina, he mentioned his ability to just play error-free for 6 to 7 hours. So yeah, again, that gets to what you're saying about those Lee chess sessions that everyone made fun of. But
I mean, really, I'd recommend anyone to look at it. I mean, it really is amazing. The other funny thing about it, though, because when I talked about it with Garry, and Garry said, "Oh, well, tell me then what he was playing." And well, you did notice he'd been playing d4, knight f3, g3 a lot, and
interesting.
And then it came up, it came up in game 6, and it was I don't know. I mean, he plays a lot of different things on Lee chess, but it was somehow quite striking, to see that. But I'd really recommend, anyone, just play through those games and be amazed, because it was a really amazing standard of instant playing without any sort of thinking,
And by the way, how did the relationship, the opportunity to do the videos with Garry Kasparov for Kasparovchess, how did that come about, Matthew? They were so fun to watch.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks very much. It came about just quite late, actually. And I just got asked, I don't know whether maybe Garry, Garry's just nonstop busy. So I don't know whether suddenly, some sort of gap in his diary came out, and he suddenly said, yeah, okay, we're going to do that. But I got asked quite late, and funnily enough, through very good fortune, I've been planning out my Christmas holidays together with my manager, and we sort of said, well, one of us has got to be present. There's got to be one of us present, throughout the period. And he's got kids, and he said, okay, well, I really do want to take Christmas off. And then I thought, well, COVID lockdown, what am I going to do? Just stay at home, but I could also just take my holiday now, my Christmas holiday now, and watch the World Championship. Okay, that's nice. So we just agreed that quite late, and then virtually, literally the next day, got called and said, would you fancy doing this with Garry? It just was just made it for me, real great thing. I was spending all my time with my engines, doing all sorts of lovely stuff, analyzing the World Championship, and then in the evening you get just half an hour to discuss it with Garry afterwards. This incredible, obviously, huge, just a towering figure for me, because he was always there when I was a professional chess player. He was the standard that you aspired to, and still obviously incredibly strong player, and huge World Championship experience, just to talk about what's going on in a match. So no, that was incredible, and I enjoyed it very much. I thought the talks went well. I mean, I thought Garry really had a lot to say about all the the match and the games as well. So I enjoyed it an awful lot.
Yeah, and the psychological factors, of course, and any listeners who haven't seen those video recaps, even knowing the outcome, it's still worth watching. Now, Matthew, are there any, obviously, I watched them and learned a lot from them, but is there any particular insight from these weeks of recording, any sort of big picture takeaway from talking to Kasparov, or particular statement he made that really resonated with you?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think what we said before the match was that the big question in the match was going to be we were sure that Magnus was always going to come back from a horrific event in the during the World Championship. The big question was whether Young could do that. As it turned out, not the only commentators to say that, I hasten to add, but that was and that was somehow the big thing that that came out of the match, of course, and I think probably probably the one thing that you can't train, really. I don't think you can train to come back from that sort of blow in this sort of situation. It's partly pot luck, and it's partly down to the player himself. I mean, what I also found quite interesting was I asked Garry some questions about how did you do things? The last couple of days before an event. Would you take a rest? Would you take a break? Keep your mind fresh? And Garry, he obviously found this a very strange question. He, just sort of looked and said, no. Once I started the event, I went. It was chess, walking, sleeping, chess. And what you really felt from that was, and made me think, because Jan talked about how he'd asked for advice from many different players about the match, and but that he'd realised that a match was unique. And you realise also that players are unique, because I think for Garry, I got this incredible impression that for him it was all about, once the match came within sight, he would give it everything, and if it didn't go well, he would simply pour more of that astonishing energy that he's got into grabbing it by the scruff of the neck and making it go right, but that's something that that Garry could do, and that was his innate huge personal strength, I think, and then you notice that other players have to do it in a different way, and I think for every player a World Championship is a unique experience, and they have to approach it in their unique way. And but that really struck me, trying to find out from Garry, what do you do to relax? What did you do? If you had a loss even, but the answer kind of was always the same. It's simply, energy. Get back to it, put more in, I guess what you also had in those days, though, that's not the case now. Of course, Garry always had, I guess, a big preparation advantage. I mean, he was right up there with computer preparation, with all the way that he organised his training and everything, and I think that was always, you always had when you face Garry, you always had an enormous amount of opening minefields to avoid. Whereas, of course, here in this match, you just saw parity in the openings. Essentially, all that work by all the seconds beforehand was to make sure that nothing bad happened.
Right.
And and for the rest, you were going for small advantages, but there was never the real likelihood of a huge bombshell hitting you. Whereas obviously in Garry's time with you think of the match against Vichy in 95, this where Vichy got hit by in this Open Lopez with this enormous novelty. That's kind of unthinkable nowadays, really. What Garry did afterwards, switching, with his opponent a bit woozy, switching to the dragon, that could definitely happen. That was really modern World Championship approach. It was probably the world's most unpleasant thing that could have happened to Vichy. That was superb psychology and match insight and all that. That you could imagine in a match nowadays. But that the Open Lopez novelty, you'd be very surprised if that happened.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, lots to learn from Garry, but how to relax during a match, probably not at the top of the
not
list.
At all, no.
So we've still got a handful of questions I'd like to power through, Matthew, if you're okay. Great. So let's bring it back to engines just for a minute, and then I want to talk more about your competitive career, which I know you say you're retired, but you still managed to play, at least pre-COVID. So this one is from Ian Mason. Thank you for supporting the pod, Ian. And Ian asks, he says, do you think that correspondence chess has a future, given that 90% of the games at the top level are draws where using engines is permitted?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, we've got quite a few correspondence players in the TCEC chat, and they're always complaining about the number of draws and how difficult it is. But I mean, what they were experimenting with for a correspondence tournament, I think is happening at the moment, is starting just like the TCEC from complicated openings. So starting 8 or 9 moves in, and just having a position that that is unbalanced, favors one side, and then you're going to have to show your skills to hold it. And I think that, to be honest, I think that's the future of correspondence chess, because I mean, it is just like engine chess. I mean, it's just you can't, you need some something extra, in order to unbalance the game, in order to get wins. But if you don't have that, then I would think that correspondence chess would kind of lose its interest, beyond research into openings and anything like that. But in terms of competitive interest, it will get lost. So I mean, this approach of starting correspondence players off from unbalanced openings and seeing what they can do, I think that's a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. That would help. And it seems like engines, I mean, there does seem to have been a bit of a leap, as you've mentioned, in the past few years in their strength. But overall, over the past, say, 20 years, it seems like they average maybe 50 points of elo a year in gain. Do you see that continuing? Are they just going to keep getting better and better?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, just as a practical chess player, and I think Dubov said this in an interview, you have the feeling, to be honest, that they've increased in strength ginormously the past 3 years. But one of the computer programmers, a very, very bright guy, Giancarlo Pascuto, he said that actually, if you look at it objectively, the game's been pretty steady. I mean, the engines just kept on improving. I think it's just the style and the things that they can do, and the way that we feel they've outstripped us in areas that we were always stronger in. I think that's why, as a practical chess player, it feels huge. I mean, you would have thought that at some stage, you would have a limit to how strong they can get, but they really are improving all the time. I mean, partly due to the just amazing number of people in the open source community who keep on working at it. I mean, the Leela guys, it's just it's just a bunch of kids, you'd call them. They're
right.
less than half my age, most of them. And one of the guys was saying, "Yeah, no, I'm one of the old guys." I said, "How old are you?" He said, 25. It's just amazing.
Wow.
So, but I mean, and the Stockfish guys as well. There's a huge community. I mean, one of my videos actually on my Silicon Road site, I shared the Stockfish testing site, where you can see day on day all the tests that are being run on all the patches, and it's the most impressive software development factory I've ever seen. Just from an IT point of view. So yeah, there's lots of people working in their free time, in their spare time, just making this stuff stronger and stronger. And yeah, really, I mean, it does get stronger and stronger. So I think we're just going to keep on seeing improvements. And also it's because especially the two main engines, Leela and Stockfish, are just approaching things from completely different angles. So Stockfish always typically had an absolutely godlike search, so calculation, but its evaluation was less strong. But they've added, some neural net technology, NNUE, to their engine, and that net is getting bigger and bigger, and the evaluation is getting better and better. So they're approaching it from that angle with a godlike search and a stronger and stronger evaluation. And then Leela had the amazing, sophisticated evaluation, but its search was somewhat weaker. So and they're approaching it somewhat from that angle. So they're trying to make their evaluation better and better, but also to improve their search as well. And I mean, the two engines, they just sort of keep on getting better and better from different angles. So I think progress is going to carry on for a long time. I think still you don't get the feeling, talking to the developers, that they're that they're running out of ideas or running out of things to try to make their engines better. I mean, to be honest, the opposite. I think they're coming up with with more and more stuff. I mean, there's new neural net technology. Was it attention networks? And they were looking at that now all of a sudden for Leela. What could we do with that? Would that work? Could we implement that? And on the Leela side, of course, it's kind of, for them, it's kind of half a chess project and also half research into neural nets, into technology that could be applied to so many other things as well. So I mean, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating subject, and I get I'm an IT guy, of course, so obviously I'll always have some extra enthusiasm for for the IT part of chess nowadays, but still, it's incredibly exciting and interesting area of chess, I think, and with a lot of implications for the real world as well, so and it's always interesting, that's what we always what we found about DeepMind. I mean, DeepMind bring out so many new technologies, so many amazing discoveries, but if you can view it through the prism of what you understand about Alphazero and as a chess engine, it suddenly makes so much more sense, rather than just trying to get directly into complicated science. It's it's very exciting period for chess engines and for IT in general in the world.
Amazing to hear that they can just keep getting stronger and stronger. But yeah, I mean, certainly doesn't seem like they're letting up, and I trust what you and the experts have told you. One more engine question, which I think is important because this has come up on the podcast before. It's a common issue. This is a question from Alex Friedman. Alex says, in winning positions, engines are usually going into complications without fear, when the more human way to win would be to simplify and not allow counterplay. This makes it difficult to learn how to win one games using engine analysis. Are there engines that are more instructive in this sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. I mean, they can just certainly from winning positions, engines can see, well, pretty much the end often. So, yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a tough one. I mean, to be honest, what I found, it's not quite the same, but what I found to be a great training, and again, I give an example of that in the Silicon Road. It's taking won positions, clearly won positions for you that you've maybe won in a game that you played, and then just try and beat Stockfish from there. And, that gives such an amazing insight into the defensive possibilities of positions that you consider are just, clearly lost, hopeless. I mean, I gave an example in the Silicon Road. It was a game, it was a pairs game that I played with Terry Chapman against Chris Gant and Nick Pert. And we reached this ending, blacks just, I considered it to be trivially winning, and we won it, very smoothly in the game. Then you put it against Stockfish, and I made 1.5 out of 3. I lost one of them as black, and I drew one, and then, I won one as well. And, the resources and the coordination of the pieces, it was a rook and bishop versus rook and knight ending that Stockfish achieved, with king, bishop, bishop and rook and its pawns, was just incredible, and that was a real eye opener again, for me about the possibilities that you have in position. So yeah, no, I understand the point, and I think it's true. Engines can calculate too well. One nice thing, again, is that you can try is running Leela on very low calculation, because then it won't be able to calculate its way to the end, but it will just try and feel its way positionally to a winning advantage, and that can be a very nice way to practice that winning one games. But I really think that this training of trying to win your own one games against Stockfish, and seeing what it can do to you and how it can resist, that's one of the most that's a real eye opener. I think it'll really give you a lot more faith in the defensive possibilities after that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's whenever I try these like drill exercises, winning like even against the like web-based bots that are not like as strong, it's depressing.
It's depressing, but it's also challenging. I mean, if you get past that, if you can understand, what's going wrong in your thinking process and why you're not actually able to do that, then it's a big advantage. And again, you could never get a human coach to do that against you. You'd never get anyone with the patience. Oh, okay, I'll try again then. It's but funnily enough, I mean, this was when I studied with Mark Turetsky for a couple of years in 94, life-changing experience for me. But he did a lot of that. I mean, he gave you these very complicated studies which he'd analyzed to enormously, and then he made you play them out. You didn't know when the solution would end or whatever. You just had to play them out, and he would take the other side. And again, one of the most useful and challenging ways of training that I've done. And yeah, with the engines, you can replicate that perfectly. So it's a really, really valuable way of training.
Yeah, and you can hear more on Matthew's experiences working with I am Mark Dvoretsky, legendary trainer, in our first interview. I was definitely keen to ask you about that the first time around. And the last major topic I wanted to talk about, Matthew, of course, you've alluded several times to being retired, but you do play league games and you've maintained your rating, which is, increasingly rare. I was checking before our interview, and there's currently only 5 people over the age of 40 in the top 50. Topalov, Adams, Anand, yourself, and GM Zoltan Almasi. So it's a rare feat, and I think a lot of our listeners, we're not trying to play. Well, we would love to, but we're not realistically expecting to play at the elite level. But we are hoping to at least maintain our form or improve. So Tyron Ross Price had written in and asked for any advice you could share in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's several things. I mean, first of all, you've got to work out for yourself, first of all, what makes you enjoy over the board play, when you actually play. I mean, and that is the very most important thing that you've got to guarantee. So if and it varies from player to player, so for some players, the whole process of preparing for a game, building up to it, making a big event of it, that's absolutely part and parcel of the experience. I mean, Terry Chapman, who we interviewed in Chess for Life, for him, that was a big thing, that whole over the board preparation, that's how he lived for his games. For other people, just, being relaxed and turning up to the board and being in a nice, calm frame of mind, that's what they want. But I mean, that is the basis. I mean, you have to understand what works for you best and what will lead to the greatest enjoyment for playing. Because if you're amateur, that's, that's part and parcel of it. It's even the same for me, even if my definition of enjoyment is somewhat more lunatic on the lunatic fringe than most people. But I mean, there are certain types of work that I really cut out just because I decided that it wasn't, I was just trying to be too professional, and I wanted to be, to get the enjoyment there first and foremost. I mean, the other thing I think.
What did you cut out?
I actually cut out this enormous amounts of sifting through engine analysis that I used to do. I used to run engines for 6 hours, multiple engines for 6 hours on various positions in my openings, and then sift through all the analysis and find the best moves from all the, put it all together. It took me hours and hours and hours, and I eventually decided that I found that quite distressing work. It was whereas when I discovered, when I really sort of got into the idea that I could run engine games, just run massive engine games, get all these amazing, incredible fights and all that, and pick out 10 games from that total of games, and that would be my inspiration for playing my openings. That was that was a lifesaver, I have to say. It was that was really something that gave me enormous pleasure preparing for my openings, without the enormous mental drain that of sifting through mathematically move by move, just trying to work out what the engines felt was 0.18 rather than 0.17. I mean, that was a bad use of engines, though instructive in its own way. But that, I cut that out and tried to move to something that would give me, pleasure and also be, more useful. And I think, all this running of engine games was a great switch. But I mean, the other thing I think as well is that, as an amateur, what I noticed was that, it's very easy to lose track of your chess because you've got your job, you've got family, you've got all sorts of stuff. And, before you know it, you spent a week and you haven't looked at chess at all. So one of the key things to do, that I had for myself was 15 minutes of chess a day, every single day. It doesn't really matter what it is. It could just be solving some tactical puzzles or playing through a nice game. But you've got to keep those channels active, because before you know it, a week's gone past, and that for an amateur player, that's like being away from the board for a month. It's just like you can't remember stuff anymore. So that's very important. And then if you're looking at, if I wanted to do some regular work, what should I do? I'd say tactics puzzles, evocative games that inspire you, and some end games, maybe some end game studies, and that should really be the basis of your regular work. Tactics, because missing tactics, that's the biggest cause of frustration during a game. If you spend 10 minutes looking at a move and then you realize at the end, oh my goodness, I'm dropping a piece that way. Spotting those quickly, that's really, really important. Evocative games that inspire you, that will stick in your memory, and that will come easily to your mind when you're actually playing a game, when you need a parallel or something like that. I mean, it's why I love engine games, because I find so many of them so unbelievably fantastic, and you see a theme in them, and there's some lovely tactics as well, and you think, wow, I can remember that. I'll remember that. That will come into my head, when I play. And then end games, just because it teaches you so much about coordination of material, of limited material. It really teaches you about the power of individual pieces, about how to get the most out of them. And my belief is that is at the basis of engines, and why they're so strong, and how they evaluate. They just understand how to get the most out of their pieces. And of course, studies are the ultimate, the ultimate way to get to really understand that and get the most out of that. So I mean, that I would say would be your basic trading. So two things that require a little bit of work for you, and one piece of work that just requires ooh and ah, and just being open and and enjoying it. And then from time to time, you can't get away from it, but it should be more just maybe a concentrated piece of work that you maybe do one weekend when, who knows, your wife and kids have gone to visit the family or something. You work on openings, and you just work through, and you have a look at what your openings, what the current state of your openings are, whether there have been any recent games, get some fresh ideas maybe from playing through recent games, but that's more, I see that more as a periodic chunk of work that you do, rather than every day going through them. I'd say that in general, the working on your game, and then just working on your opening in just at one period of time, concentrated, that's more useful. Because opening work, I tend to find if I do it in chunks, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, I just tend to lose track of it completely, and by the end I can't remember anymore what I've been doing. Openings, it's kind of logic, right? I mean, it all fits together, and it's all very consequent. If he does that, I do that. If he does that, I do that. When he does that, I do this. You've got to do that sort of work in concentrated fashion. I think. I don't think you can do it just a little bit here, a little bit there. I don't think that works at all, or not for me anyway. Whereas the other sort of work that I mentioned, you can really do little bits of it, and it just builds up very nicely. It really builds up to give you extra strength. So that's what I would recommend. But the most important basis being really that you've got to make sure you understand what makes you enjoy playing, and go for that. And also you've got to make sure that every single day you do a little bit of chess, just to make sure that your brain keeps active and that little space in your brain that's devoted to chess, that stays there and doesn't get pushed out by arguments at work or having to repair a leaky tap or something like that. You've got to look after that little spot in your brain for chess.
Excellent. Yeah, fantastic advice. And Matthew, as we record this on Friday, what's today's date? December 17th or something like that. There's no quit in COVID. The Omicron is wreaking havoc, I know, in so many places. Yeah. So are you going to manage to, or do you have plans of competing over the board again, if and when this ever ends?
Yeah, no, I do want to compete again, actually. I mean, it's, what I've found is that every time I compete, I learn an awful lot. The lessons that you get in over the board play, can't be compared to what you do in analysis. It just, and for me, actually, the whole process of preparing for a game, I find it incredibly enriching process. So, I definitely do want to play. The only thing is that, I'm quite close to my parents, and, helping to look after them during, and support them during the lockdown. I'm a little bit nervous about doing too much, and exposing myself too much, and then bringing COVID over to them, really. So that's kind of what's holding me back at the moment. I've done some little things, gave a lecture in a London Classic recently, and done some small things, but at the moment I don't really want to get into to anything like that. I mean, just hoping, I think like all the rest of us, that there is some end to this, and that we're going to be able to reach a state where even if it's not gone, that at least the risks are not too terrible, even if you would catch COVID. But at the moment you're sort of very nervous about that. Well, I mean, you see somebody like Nigel, who I spoke to at London Classic a couple of Saturdays ago, and you see that he's in hospital with oxygen and all that. It's still a really scary thing still. So and again, for yourself, you'd worry a little bit less. I'm in decent health, but obviously when you're when you've also got your responsibilities towards your family and stuff like that, it makes you nervous. But yeah, I mean, I do really want to play. I mean, I'm not. I've never played, even as a professional. I was never somebody who played all the time. I'm not, you see somebody like Magnus, who you feel could happily play 365 days a year, every type of chess, and be happy. I'm not that sort of person, but I do enjoy the whole process of getting ready for a game and going there, and then putting in your preparation and tricking people in time trouble, that sort of thing. Yeah, all the stuff you can't get just out of analysis. It's hopefully it'll happen sometime.
Yeah, I hope so too. But I echo what you're saying about the need to be cautious right now, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay. Well, Matthew, if we just have one more question, if we could get to it rapid fire.
No problem.
Awesome. Thank you. And this one is from Manuel Tur, who says he bought Chess for Life after reading about it in Game Changer, and it's become one of his all-time favorite chess books. And as I've mentioned before, it's about adult improvement, so definitely recommend it for inspiration and insights to any listeners. And Manuel writes, the Carlsbad structure features prominently in Matthew's book on the Queen's Gambit Declined, in Chess for Life, and in Game Changer. And what is it about this structure that fascinates you so much?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the fascination for it came from Mark Dvoretsky. I mean, I've told this story about, how he said, what do you know about the Carlsbad structure? And I said, well, and then he said, let me tell you, and 5 minutes of complete historical survey, all the plans. And, it really opened up to me, how you could understand something, and what you would need, and the whole breadth of what you could have to understand something. I mean, so in some way that this Carlsbad structure is sort of talismanic for me. I mean, it was an example to me of how deep chess knowledge can get, and I think that's why I've kept on coming back to it. But also, the breadth of plans and the breadth of styles and the stuff that you can do with it is incredible. It's just this structure, and then all the great players have played it, and all of them have had their own tweak on it and their own way of playing it. And you've got the minority attack, you've got the central attack that Botvinnik always chose. Karpov always did some sort of minority attack, but in an odd way, and somehow it always worked. Alphazero, suddenly started attacking like a lunatic on the king side, which I've never seen before. And it's there is really so much richness to it. And I think it's also for me a big example of the richness of chess. That a pawn structure like that, and there's so many different ways of playing it, so many different ways of approaching it, so much subtlety in how you need to react to White's queenside play. And it's just it's kind of talismanic for me. But it started with Dvoretsky, which I said, we said before, that was such a huge moment in my chess career, and somehow that structure keeps him living within me, I think.
Excellent. And again, more on that experience can be found in our first interview. Well, Matthew, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time. This has been amazing. So many insights about everything ranging from the World Championship match to chess longevity to engines, of course. So the book is called Silicon Road to Chess Improvement. Also strongly recommend all of Matthew's other books, often in collaboration with Natasha Regan. Anything to add, Matthew, before we wrap things up here?
No, I mean it's just just the point about the book really is to try and make chess engines, used for us to use, and also to try and get a sense of the enjoyment and the human value that working with engines can have, I think, we tend to only look at engines as, like correcting marking, correcting a test somehow, you did it right, you did it wrong. But I think it can also help to generate all the feelings and all the emotions and all the material that you need in order to play chess well practically, and that's really what the book is about. And I said, I'm tremendously enthusiastic about engine chess, but it also comes, about because I've used so much of it in my own play, and I think it's really, helped me. So, hopefully people will enjoy that as well. It's and I think, in any case, I think it gives a nice introduction as well to engines in general, and I think, the role of engines is only going to keep on growing in chess, and I think it's very important to keep up with that, so that you can keep up with the whole breadth of chess as it develops.
Well said. And I imagine you're going to stay on this beat, Matthew, the engine beat.
No, it's too fascinating, and too many interesting things happening to give it up. So, obviously, thrilled to follow, great human chess like the World Championship as well. That's that is still the ultimate thrill. But the nice thing then is that you can use engines to deepen your understanding of it and give you, insight that you would have had to wait, years for it before, and now you can get it, so quickly.
Okay, well, the chess world is richer for your explanations and your keeping track of it and sharing it with everyone. So thank you, and we should give one last plug to your YouTube channel, also called The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, where Matthew is doing free, obviously, little snippets of things he picked up from engines and stuff from the World Championship and so on. So Matthew, this has been great. Hope to do it again someday if you can find the time to write another book somehow. But greatly appreciated, and have a good night.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Ben.
Perpetual Chess is proud to be a member of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Be sure to check out their sports and pop culture related podcasts as well. I also, as always, would like to thank Matthew Passy for producing the show. Without Matthew, Perpetual Chess would not exist. And I want to thank everyone who listens to the show, whether it be on your own without telling anyone about it, keeping it secret, or if you're helping to spread the word, all the better, whether it be telling a friend about a particularly impactful interview, or whether it be writing a positive review online. All of that stuff helps get the word out and helps Perpetual Chess continue to grow. But most of all, of course, I want to thank those that provide financial support to Perpetual Chess. Without you all, Perpetual Chess would not be possible in its current form. And I would like to give special thanks to the following people and entities. Here comes the list. Chessable.com, David Lazarus of Lasman Chess, coach of Dave's Young Tigers on Lichess, Quality Chess Books, the Capital City Chess Club, the Abysmal Depths of Chess blog, Adaptive Interactive Web Designs and Services, the Apprentice Twitch channel, A Needy Deer, Austin Clough, Benjamin Porteau, Bill Sigler, Kathy Carr, Chad Oliver, the Charlotte Chess Center, the Chess Central's Chess blog, chessmood.com, Chris Flanagan, Chris Lott, Dan O'Hanlon, Daniel He, Danny Davidson, David Mitchell. I am Dimitri Schneider, Douglas Wilson. I am Eric Rosen, Farhan Tharwar, Faraz Sawaf, Gary Foreman, Glenn Downing, Greg Harfst, Greg Shahadi, Gregory Golick, Hampus Axelson, James Kennedy, Jay Garrison, Jeff Martinson, Jeff Schaefer, Jeremy Nielsen, John Jernigan, John MacArthur, Kevin Forsyth, Kevin Gilmore, Kevin O'Callahan, Kevin Pryor, King Cell, the King's Crusher YouTube channel, the law offices of Stuart Katz, Matthew Feeney, Michael Can, FM Michael Oplin, Mr. Mike Shahadi, Michael Sullivan, the famous Mr. Dodgy, the Nerdnays Twitch channel, Perry McManus, GM Peter Prohaska, Peter Sodi, Philip Flemons, the Playmore Chess Academy of the Hamden Chess Club, Ray Lillywhite, Reuven Fisher, Rick Rivas, Robert Hansen, Ross Crossland, the Seattle Chess Club, Shane Unger, Stephen Kelty, Stephen Martinez, Sven Gierson, Thomas Tachenko, Todd Bryant of StrongChess.com, Todd Kennedy, The Vintage Patzers, which is a Chess.com improver group, Wayne Beam, and I also would like to thank the following: #ChessPunks, who are the adult improvers on chess Twitter, Ace Vallega, Adam Fowler, Adam Johansson, Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adrian Gutierrez, Al Hastings, Alan and Maggie Sue, Alex Pejas, Alexander Markovitz, Antonio Cancino, Antonio Leonfort, FM Andre Terakov, Dr. Andrew Perry, Angus McLeod, Barry Hessian, Bill Gruber, Bill Juniper, Bill Moran, Bill Trammell, Brad and Andy Rosen, Brandon Halseed, Brian Chase, Brian Mullis, Bruce Scott, Bruno Johnson, Brian Tillis of Palm Beach Chess, Cameron Davis, Ken Kabadayi, Chad Hilton, Chad Likens of Rose City Chess in Portland, the Chess Dojo, Chess for Charity Jacksonville, Chess Patzer Spain, Dr. Charles Snodgrass, Chris Kiefer, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Baumgardner, Christopher Chabris, Christopher Wood, I am Christoph Zalecki, aka Chess Explained, Coach Jay's Chess Academy, Costa Carras, Courtney Fry, Craig Mallon, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Naylor, Dave Best, Dave Saylor, David Bliskacek, David Brown, David Goris, David Hamblin, David Cramley, David Peterson, Dennis Parrish, FM Donnie Ariel, Dwayne Edmonds, Ed Daly, Ed Mead, Edwin Rodriguez, Eric Baldwin, Ethan Smith, Evan Rosenberg, Ewan Richardson, Ian Mason, Felipe Mayo Perea, Fox Valley Chess Club, Francis Letard Lavoie, Frank Tortoris, MD, Frank Zananes, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Gautam Narula, Gene Stewart, George Foote, George Harris, Giovanni Russo, Gregory Higgins, Han Shu, Harish Srinivasan, Howard Vihan, Jacob Kovac, Jason Apollo, Jason Murray, Jacques Pari, James Aspinwall, James Bonastia, James Muir, Jason Woolham, Jay Tuttle, Jaydeep Chakrabarty, Jeff Anderson, Jeff Davis, Jeffrey Martello, Yep Hoyland, Jerry Wells, Jesse DeCumos, Jesse McNulty, Jim Jones, Jim Ratliff, Jim Sadler, Joe DeSano, Joe Valdez, Joel Thomas Ramos, John McAdams, John Tolley, Juan Almaguer, Dr. John Fallon, John Fernandez, John Fontaine, John Hartman, John Jeffrey, John McMurtry, Jonathan Bannister, Jonathan Slater, John Quist, John Tully, Jose Rodriguez, Justin Gardner, Justin Goodfellow, Jen Shahadi, Joel Rocky, John Thompson, Grandmaster Josh Friedel, I am Kari Christensen, WGM Katerina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, Krishna Gopala Krishnan, Kyle McAvoy, Larry Cook, Larry Reifert, Lars Wiesen, Macaulay Peterson, Maria Emelianova, a.k.a. Photo Chess, Mark Chaves, Mark Fitzpatrick, Mark Miller, Mark Wilkins, Marko Butolovich, Martin Knudsen, Martin Krug, Matt Ferrari, Matthew Coughlin, Matthew Tedesco of SeattleChessMeetup.org, Matthias Plock, Mechanics Institute Chess Club of San Francisco, Michael Allard, Michael Hudson, Mike Clem, Mitchell Fabian, Nate Goebel, Nate Solon, Neil Bruce, Nigma Malajanov, Nicholas Isabel, Olaf Mueller-Michaels, Pablo Davila, GM Pascal Charbonneau, Passy Passanen, Paul Bain, Paul Clarkson, Paul Eckert, Paul Sweeney, Paulo Santana, Peter Lux, Queenside Management Limited in Switzerland, Randall Montgomery, Randy Temple, Ricky Grijalva, Richard Hallenbach, Richard McCormick, Richard Tucker, Robert Callahan, Robert Turner, Robert Wall, Robert Wilson, Rory Coleman, Ryan Berg, Samson Teaches Chess, Satyajit Malagu, the Say Chess YouTube channel and publishing empire, Scott McKinnon, Scott Rose, Sean Krause, Sebastian Finsterwater, Sergei Makagon, Seth Ruzica, Seth Will, Sean Tracy, Silver Knights in Richmond, Simon Schmidt, Stefan Roller, Stephen Miller and Tom George, WGM Tatyev Abrahamian, Terry King, Thomas Brown, Tim Brennan of TacticsTime.com, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, FM Timothy Wall, Tobiah Rex, Tom Edsel, Tommy Farron, Tony Rotella, Tyron Price, Victor Beauchamp, William Brock, William Peterson, FM Zhao Cheng of Chess1000.com, Zachary Hoskin, and Zhivko Stoyanov. Thanks for listening, everyone.